Good evening, everybody. It's Pastor John Jenkins from French's Chapel in Dublin, Virginia. Hope you've had a blessed day. Hope things are going well for you and yours, and you're skating through this coronavirus glitch in our lives without much problem. We're glad to have a privilege to come into your home or on your phone or wherever you may be viewing this now or later. We're grateful for the opportunity to be with you. This evening I'm going to be talking again from the book of James, but it's not just going to be a Bible study. Some of the things we're going to talk about tonight, where I come from, would probably get to response, them's fighting words. And it may be to some people, but still we want to look at what the scriptures have to say. And James, of course, as I've told you, chapter 1, he was dealing with teaching these young Christians the difference between trials and temptations. Chapter 2 was about our faith without works was useless and dead. Chapter 3 was about learning to control the tongue, which is an ongoing process for all of us. Chapter 4, of course, was dealing with carnal lust and selfishness or self-centeredness, even spiritual arrogance. So James is taking some pretty tough topics to these Jewish converts. And again, James is either the first or second book recorded, so he didn't have any other scriptural references to go by. So he's teaching them based on what he has and his experiences from the Lord, and he is giving these new converts some pretty stringent teaching, encouraging them, letting them know that Christianity is more than just a badge you wear or a bumper sticker you put on your car. Christianity is a lifestyle. It is the lifestyle. It is a change of perception, a change of behavior. It's a change in every aspect of life. When you make Jesus your Lord, see, he wants to be our King. When we submit to his authority, then we lose sight of ourselves. And everything he wants us to do becomes priority in our lives. So in chapter 5 tonight, in the book of James, we get a look at today's, in this world, especially in this country, the favorite topic, money. James is going to be saying some pretty tough things in how we handle our finances. Now, it may seem a little funny that here it is, these young believers that's just come out of Judaism, and now they've only been saved a very short time, that James would hit them with this tough topic of money. And I'll tell you why he did it, because in the Jewish faith, there was a strong belief that money, wealth, and possessions was a sign of the favor of God. And if you were poor and lacked those things, it was believed to be a curse from God. So these converts come into this new Christian movement with the same perception on money. And James is going to tell them right off the bat, hey, no, that belief system is wrong. Money and wealth and possessions is not a sign of the favor of God. We don't have to look any further than criminals, drug dealers, thieves, at every level of society that have made bukus of money illegally, to know that it's not a sign of God's favor in every instance. Now, we know God blesses. I'm certainly not disputing that. But I believe God blesses us so that we can be effective in ministry, not just so that we can accumulate vast resources here on earth, but that's for another night. But these are some pretty tough statements, and I want you to look with me in James chapter 5, verse 1. He says, "Look here, you rich people, weep and groan with anguish because of all the terrible troubles ahead of you. Now James is telling them, listen, all this wealth, all these possessions is going to lead to trouble. They're going to be more trouble than they're worth at some point. Now, I've never owned a boat. I'm not an avid fisherman. I know people who have owned boats, and I'm not sure this is true. But it's been said the two happiest days in a fisherman's life is the day he buys his boat and the day he sells his boat. Because they usually turn out to be more maintenance and more trouble than benefit and enjoyment. Now, I don't know that to be true, but it does make a little bit of sense. When we amass things, and we live in a society that's driven, I mean literally driven by possessions, by more, have more, go more, be more, just more. Nothing ever seems to be enough. But when we amass a lot of things, when they take our time to maintain them, to tend to them, to even in the use of them. And the more time we invest in the things of this world, James has already talked about, the less time we have to invest in the things of the kingdom of God. Now, things in and of themselves, wealth in and of itself, nothing wrong with it. If God's blessed you, if you've worked hard. And I know people very close to me that have worked hard their whole life and never asked for a handout from anybody. And they've been able to be successful, to be prosperous. Well, God bless them. I'm happy for them. But we're not talking necessarily about the reward of hard work here. And so we'll get into that. James says, your wealth is rotting away and your fine clothes are moth-eaten rags. What in the world would he mean by that? Well, you got so much you don't know what to do with it. When you got so many vehicles that when you go out to get in one, the battery's dead every time because you haven't driven it for so long, maybe you got one or two more vehicles than what you may actually need. This is what James is talking about here. When you amass a lot of things, they'll run down without using them, without clothes in the closet that haven't been worn for years and things like that. He's using very basic illustrations here to make a deeper point. He says, your gold and silver have become worthless. Now, he's not saying gold and silver is worthless. So what is he saying? He's saying you've got so much, it's just sitting there in the bank. And it's doing you and nobody else any good. It's just sitting there. It's worthless in that sense. When God blesses us and allows us to accumulate, if I was a betting man, I would bet in every case it's so that he can flow his blessings through us to help others that are in need, to promote ministry. When that money's just sitting in the banks and it's doing nobody any good, basically it's worthless, is what James is saying. The very wealth you were counting on will eat away your flesh like fire. In other words, you'll worry yourself to death over losing. People today are up and down over the stock market. Well, I learned how not to lose any money in the stock market. I don't put any there. I don't have much to start with. I had one experience with the stock market and lost almost everything I had, and that was enough for me. Now, you may have had better luck at it, but you're worried about it. You're worried about where would it be tomorrow? Will the interest rates go up or down? Will the stocks go up or down? They tell me, well, I've read Howard Hughes, one of the wealthiest men in history, near the end of his life wouldn't even go outside because he was afraid he'd catch something and die and not get to enjoy his wealth. But he didn't enjoy what he had to begin with. This treasure you have accumulated will stand as evidence against you on the day of judgment. This is some pretty stout teaching here. What James is saying is you'll have to give an account. I'll have to give an account. we will all have to give an account of our stewardship, of the blessings, the finances that God has given us in this life. Now, a lot of people write a check. They even write a 10% check and call it tithing, and then believe everything else is theirs to keep. And, I'm not going to argue so much with that theology, other than to say that if God's blessed you to have an abundance, it may be because He wants you to be an abundant blessing to others. And each of us, you and I and the rich and poor alike, we're going to stand before God one day and give an account of our stewardship of what He's given us on this earth. And, I like it unto a balance scale, perhaps, where He will put everything we did for selfish interest in this hand, and then everything we did for spiritual and kingdom interest in this hand, and we want this hand to be more than this one. We want God's investment to be more than ours, but I'm afraid in a lot of cases, and I don't want it to be in my case, but in a lot of cases it may be the other way around. We may stand before God and have to explain why we spent more money on stuff and things and toys and this, that, and the other. Necessary, unnecessary, that's always debatable. Spent more money on that and left children hungry and left the gospel out of other nations of the world and let missionaries do without. I don't know. There has to be a balance somewhere, I guess, is what I'm saying. I don't think God ever expects us to, unless He directly tells you to sell everything you have and give it all away. That's not what I'm saying at all. But there has to be a balance in the blessings that God gives us, the riches that we have, to help others, to help the ministry, to promote the gospel. So that's a challenging thought. And God says what we've done with it, what we've accumulated, will stand as evidence against us on that day of judgment. Then He says, listen, hear the cries. Here's why James is talking about this. Here's the issue and the problem. Listen, hear the cries of the field workers whom you have cheated out of their pay. The wages you held back cry out against you. The cries of those who harvest your fields have reached the ears of the Lord of heaven's armies. Now, what's he saying here? Not everybody that has money in the bank did it on the backs of others. That's not what I'm talking about. It's not what James is talking about. But there are a lot of people who have made a lot of money off of other people. There are employers, there are business owners, there are billionaires who became that way by paying their workers an average pay, average benefits, while they gained wealth off of their hard labor and perhaps didn't treat them as fairly as their benefit that they received from their labor would have caused them to deserve to be treated better. Now, I'm going to come back to that. You have spent your years on earth, he's talking to the rich, in luxury, satisfying your every desire. You have fattened yourselves for the day of slaughter. You have condemned and killed innocent people who do not resist you. The guy on the assembly line, he don't have the choice to resist the guy in the boardroom. He don't have that choice. But I want to back up to this concept of making money off the backs of others, because we see that happening in the church. Now, I'm going to be me right here. And I'm going to share my thoughts exactly as I feel them on this topic. We have in the church world today, we have people who have become multi-millionaires. Even one particular person boasts that he has achieved billionaire status. They have accumulated multiple homes. Some of them live in compounds with homes for all their family members. And all of that, they have expensive jets. They stay in the best accommodations possible. They just have an immense amount of financial resource. And all of it comes off the backs of people like me and you who make contributions to their so-called ministry. And it is a ministry, but it's not a ministry for Jesus Christ. It's a ministry for themselves. And they have gotten rich off of other people's labors, other people's sacrifices. And they've made promises that they have not been able to keep, promises that have not come true. Now, I've said for years, and I continue to say, and I'll say until I die, that the true test of any doctrine, the true test of any teaching that's wrapped up in the word Christianity, the true test is always time. It's always time. Time will always prove whether or not a doctrine has borne fruit. Now, everything will bear fruit in its own season, is what I'm saying. It's what the Bible teaches. And we've lived in a season of prosperity teaching and preaching long enough to see that the only people getting wealthy in this teaching are the teachers. Because the money always flows up. And off the backs of average people who have hopes that the gospel somehow has become a way to be a get-rich program, all forgetting the cross, forgetting the blood, forgetting the sin. And these theologies have hurt people, and now the fruit of that is very visible. Now, I know there's a lot of you out there, or I don't even know if a lot of you will even see this, but there's a lot of people out there who would disagree with me, who are seeking that 100-fold return, who have sown that $1,000 seed. Several years ago, a network who no longer broadcasts Christian programming, but you can catch all the latest episodes of Bonanza. Well, there are no late episodes of Bonanza, but all the original episodes of Bonanza, they went through a phase where they taught this, sow this $1,000 seed and you'll get 100-fold return. And they went so long that nobody was getting rich, and people actually began to question their teaching. And the response on this particular network was unbelievable. Their response was that so many people had given the $1,000 that God was overwhelmed. Now, we serve a God, did you know that can get overwhelmed? Isn't that something that somebody would have the nerve to say that? They said that God was overwhelmed by so many $1,000 seeds that he couldn't get the full return to the people at this point. So, since the people had quit giving, waiting on their return, this particular television network said, so now you need to sow a tide me over seed. sow a smaller seed that God can get to quicker while He's working on the bigger harvest. People are we so gullible that we would believe that? And it wasn't 2 months later they was broadcasting Bonanza and Gunsmoke. Listen, it doesn't work that way. And people are going to stand before God in judgment and give an account for such teaching. Now, why did I say that? Is it not well enough? I mean, shouldn't I leave well enough alone? Why stir up a hornet's nest? Well, I believe people have been taken advantage of. And I want to go a step further. This is really the point of why I'm sharing this. I said the true test of any doctrine is always time. It's always time. Sooner or later, I mean, people are going to open their eyes and realize this thing's not working. And they'll make decisions accordingly. Now, I believe our God is sovereign. And a lot of people disagree with that today. They don't think God is sovereign. They don't think God can do everything. They think God is limited by man, and that man has to give God permission. And again, that's ridiculous. But I believe God is sovereign. And by that I mean, I believe God can do what He wants to, when He wants to, where He wants to, how He wants to who He wants to. He's God. Any God that has to be subject to the permission of man is not a God. That puts man as God. So I don't believe that. I believe it's nonsense, and I'm not afraid to say that. But in the test of the time of doctrines, we're right in the middle of a coronavirus, as you know. Over 70,000 people. Today is May 6th. Over 70,000 people, 72,000 people have died, if you can believe the news, in this country. And these same people that's made all these fortunes off of people like me and you, who had need and believed, but never got to see anything. These are the same people up there that, I know I'm going to get in trouble here, but they're the same people go around saying, God don't want anybody to be sick. Sickness was took care of the same way sin was on the cross, and taking scriptures a little bit out of context at times, a whole lot out of context at other times. Here's my point. Why am I saying this? Again, why am I stirring up this hornet's nest? All these people that go around talking about divine healing and that they have the ability to bring healing to people, where are they today in the midst of the coronavirus? The world's most recognizable televangelist, and I'm not going to call his name. I'm not afraid to, but my wife will fuss at me when she sees this if I do. The world's most recognizable televangelist, who boasts of being a billionaire, closed his church. If you have the ability to heal, why is your church not open? And why are you not healing? The world's most recognizable faith healer, who has campaigns and crusades all around the world. When the coronavirus struck, he canceled all of his healing meetings. Does that bother anybody but me? Where is the proof of that doctrine? But yet, they get rich off of promises they cannot keep. Why would a faith healer cancel his healing meetings? Why would you not be out on the street? I don't know. It just bothers me. And I see, as James was talking about here, to these rich people, they got rich by taking advantage of simple-minded or innocent people or uneducated people or people who didn't have an opportunity to do better for themselves at that point in time in life. They were taken advantage of. Excuse me. And the rich got richer and the poor stayed poor. And James says one day, the rich, the manipulative, whoever they are, God will judge. These are just my thoughts and opinions. I'm nobody's judge. I got enough to worry about when I stand before Him. But one day they're going to stand before God and they're going to have to give an account, not only of the financial oppression maybe they put people under to gain their wealth, but also spiritual oppression, fear, where they've taught things that can't be backed up by solid scripture. We can't just go into the Bible and pull one verse out. We don't have interpretive license to do that. This book was written, the New Testament written as letters. Now, when you write a letter to a person, you're addressing that person or that church or that body, and somebody that the letter's not addressed to does not have the license to pull out something of that letter and use it unless it's addressed to them. And we have people, theologies today, that just make a living out of just randomly pulling a scripture out of context. Now, you got to understand the context of every verse of the Bible. And so, I don't know. These are tough times that we're living in. People are filled with fear. People are filled with worrying. They're concerned about those that are sick. They're concerned about whether or not they're being told the truth. And I just felt like this evening, it fell right into place, James chapter 5, when he was given this warning to the rich. You and I will stand before God and give an account of our stewardship, and so will the televangelist, and so will the politicians, and so will the Bill Gates of this world. And don't you think it's funny that a man worth $105 billion is pushing the vaccine that'll make him richer? $20 a pop, $50 a pop, whatever the vaccine's going to cost, Bill Gates is going to get a cut out of every one of them. Is not $105 billion enough? It's that spirit that drives the carnal nature of human beings that James is warning about here. Wealth is not always indicative of favor from God. Sometimes it can be. Most of the time, wealth is the product of hard work, successful business ventures, maybe even inheritance. But that does not make it a sign of the favor of God. Sometimes God brings wealth, but not all the time. So anyhow, that's the thoughts of James chapter 5, verses 1 through 6. We'll finish Sunday night the rest of the chapter, and I'm not sure what I'm going to do after that. I guess these types of things are like everything else. The newness wears off. You don't get much comments or response. You don't know whether you're ministering to a need, whether you're being helpful. The interest sort of wanes, so you don't know which direction to take. And I guess it's sort of like everything else. We get used to being locked in, shut down, and maybe we neglect things that we shouldn't. But anyhow, I appreciate the opportunity to make these videos, and I hope whoever sees them can get something out of them and be blessed. All I want to do is serve the Lord, and I think that's all you want to do. And we're just trying to figure out how to do that on our own by the leadership of the Holy Spirit. So you be blessed this evening, and Sunday morning we're having a parking lot service at French's Chapel in Dublin, 11 o'clock. If for some reason it's raining, we are going inside. Stayed away too long, so if the governor hears this, he may have the police there, but we're going to have parking lot service if the sun's out. If not, I'm going to take inside whoever wants to go, and we'll practice social distancing. So God bless you. Have a wonderful evening, and stay safe, stay healthy, and love your pastor, love your church, and support them. God bless you.